Alright, so I did a bit of dissecting. I did a bit of research. By that I mean I downloaded the Burntrap model and have promptly dissected it across a few stages. Like I was trying to keep a lot of it intact so I could look at it a bit better. I've found some interesting little things in quirks. Here is the actual beta spring body design for Help Wanted, or at least it's Endoskeleton. And this will be important for this discussion because I have several things to look at. I have a sketchfab rip of the Mimic. I actually wanted to download this, but the person who uploaded the sketchfab is not allowing downloads, which is a little annoying. And then we have some actual renders in game I have that I took out of bounds. And then we have the actual costume render also on Sketchfab to look at. And this is important because there's some weird nonsense with this model in particular. But anyway, so let's go down the list of things I've noticed and kind of chronicled. First things first, the Mimic or Spring Burntrap has a lot in common with Spring Bonnie. It has the same weird. Let me find it early there. You can see the same like connected rib style, like basic rectangle ears. You can see it has the same little like circles with the connected little seams right there. It has the same spots for the ball joints. They just are way less finished in the, especially since there's an early design of it. This is a way less finished version of this, basically. Like if you look at where the joints are, they're just not detailed. But what is pretty detailed and is spot on design wise is these rib kind of plate things here that like if you were climbing in, like you'd push those out of the way and they'd like clamp around you in costume. And Burntrap has those very clearly pronounced in his design. How do I? Damn it, stupid 3D cursor. You can see those ribs are in the design. Over here, ribs, right? So get a good look at this before I get into this, because I want people to look at this themselves. I'm trying to give a good look at everything. So here's some other discoveries I found. Burntrap has no face. Period. He has his eyes, which are like flat, which no other endoskeleton really has, honestly, the whole flat thing. He has no face if you take out his flesh head. There's also like these like tube things connected to like the flesh mash, like in the middle, which is really weird. Another fun thing is he has no foot, and when he does have said foot in like the rendered model, well, this isn't rendered, but you get what I'm saying. If you look there, see it's damn it, I really don't like moving stuff in Blender like this. It's segmented, sort of. It's two core panels, which is how the Glamrock feet work, actually. Which is interesting. He also has the same coils as a Glamrock suit. However, the toe design is different on that foot. Which is one of the many weird little quirks of this redesign. It's like a lot of it, if you actually look at it, it's pretty similar, but then there's a lot of changes that they've clearly made. So this isn't just, oh, we took this model and finished it. There are objectively different design choices made here. And one of those more interesting differences is, why can I not zoom in? What the hell, Blender? You were working earlier in my first take of this video, which didn't record properly. Okay, well, you can see here, he has like this weird metal spine thing going on in the back. And if we cut back to the Mimic, he has a normal rectangular, not normal, he has like a rectangular belt kind of spine. He also has this very boxy, well-defined torso and this pretty large head proportionally, which like most endoskeletons do, but Burntrap's head is relatively humanoid scale, I would say. I mean, it's still pretty big, but it doesn't look like it could fit the mimic head in it. But that's just me eyeballing it. I don't have a mimic model to compare. But what is interesting is how literally none of this design makes it into Burntrap other than a few core traits. Most prominently is the hand. This one hand, nowhere else in the design, that hand is Burntrap's right hand, without the flesh. You can see the same holes in the arm right here. You can see the same spikes, so it's not even like they just have a similar nightmare aesthetic. What's funky is, or it should be his left hand, I'm sorry. His left hand. This is the one to compare to. This is also why there's no bone chunks or whatever those are sticking out. However, the complete rest of the arm is different. As I pointed out, the core endoskeleton is very different because not only do you not have the spine in the mimic, you don't have like the little discs and rings along the body. You don't have the little protrusions right here where it look like a rib cage. And you can actually see they did take the effort in the mimic's design. So if you know those classic like lightsaber toys that they fold in on themselves and have the rings that go out, that is something they've put into it's a very piston-like aesthetic. That is something they've put into the mimic's design so he can extend in and out, so it visually conveys that part of his character. That is missing from Burntrap's design completely. People have said, oh, Burntrap has the same teeth as the mimic, despite the fact that they really don't. The mimic very clearly has the same style of teeth as Sun and Moon, where they're like the flip out teeth with the little segments, and you could see these little dents in them where the little rivets click in. That Burntrap just does not have outright. Like, I even kind of modeled in what that would look like, and he doesn't have them. By modeled in, I mean I accidentally cut part of that while I was trying to look at the model. But you can see here, it's supposed to like, it doesn't have those at all. That design chunk is just missing in this design, and then it just continues the more you look at them. If you actually compare these two in earnest, not much lines up. One of the only things I thought people point out that's like, oh, that's a Burntrap thing, is like this chunk of what kind of looks like a mask from Burntrap, which is the right color, but I don't know. He doesn't even like the weird part of this is he doesn't even like have that chunk in the original costume. So like, unless his head's like way up here, so like this is the mimic head, and his actual teeth are way up here, which means he's completely proportionally off. That chunk of the costume isn't there. It should be like right there-ish, but it would have to be here to work for it to be this close to his teeth, like right around there-ish, which doesn't really work with that original design. So it's not like, I know that's me being very picky and precise, but I mean, just so many of these details don't line up to the point where you can say, oh, these are meant to be the same character because the endos are the same, is just objectively false. Another thing people were pointing out and claiming was that you can see where the tendons were on this hand, and that's just not true. I'm looking so hard to see what people are talking about, and it's just not there. So if you actually do look at Burntrap's hand, and you look at where like the rust is, it's not like the rust is avoiding where Burntrap's hand is, and vice versa. Like, you can see it curves in around here towards the thumb, and these are in the same position because these are both default T-pose. there's not that much rust on the left hand. Uh, and it should be like a ring like this around that part, and then there's nothing here. There's no like rust around it or outside of it or alongside it or anything like that to indicate the rust is a clue to where the flesh prior was. It's just wrong to say that's a connection because it's just not there. Uh, and it's so there are so many weird little intricacies to this, because like the book mimic had the whole like antenna rabbit ear description early on. Or like it had these things on its head that kind of looked like antennae. Uh, that Burntrap has, but the actual mimic we see in game doesn't have those. So did it just lose those? Were those just taken off? Did it also lose the entire corpse and costume? Why? How? And to be honest, in some spots the mimic looks more intact and like well maintained than Burntrap, but that's just kind of me. That's in my opinion. But like, with the exception of the parts that are clearly new, like the fact that these are like ripped straight out of the Glamrock endos, like a lot of Burntrap just looks messed up. It's a little bit easier to see with textures, but textures didn't really load properly when I tried to work them in there. But that was just me screwing it up because I'm not good with textures. I can do models, I can't texture really well. But I'm just looking at these and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't see how the endoskeletons connect to anything in this regard. And people said like they're the same scale, except they're not. And this is the same problem with like the Vanessa scale differences people were using to claim that it's different. Is like they're only somewhat the same scale in certain spots, and it doesn't even matter because the problem goes both ways. People were defending the scale issue, saying the mimic can shapeshift, or scale shift slash it kind of shapeshifts. Point is, if you have a character who can change sizes, why even talk about size at all? The mimic can be any size, so who cares about talking about what size it is or isn't? And that's the problem is like when you have a character who can just change so much about themselves in a game that's gimmick is not knowing what's real and what isn't because of a damn mask. Like, you know, what are you supposed to make of some of this? And then you have the fact that the weirdness between models goes even further. So you can see this is in game. This isn't just like, oh, someone is claiming they have a real model. This is something you can clearly see. This model is accurate. So I'm not being duped into thinking this is the fan-made model is being passed off as official. The leg's different completely between these two. The arm is pretty close. It's kind of hard to tell that these two people have lit their models differently. But the arm it looks the same. Is there a way I can turn off lighting? See, can I do that? I don't really know how to use Sketchfab. Where's brightness? Can someone get me a damn full bright version of this? This is what I hate about like using some of the outside sources for some of this stuff. It's like I can't really get a good look at it. Anyway, point is it has a different leg, so who knows what's going on there, even though the eyes are the same. Like, if you actually clip through to look at its face, it's the same. Further rings, and then there's like debates of like, is Burntrap even real, which would nullify the entire debate. And if it isn't real, then where did Gregory think of the concept of it? Or Gregory slash the Mimic, whoever drew Burntrap, because that's kind of debate. Is it because obviously Cassie's just assuming Gregory's the one who designed it. But then you have like questions like they clearly didn't model this entire endoskeleton, you know? It's clear like there's massive parts missing on the inside of this costume. So clearly they did not expect you to digest or did not want you to dissect this model, but they still made the effort to where you can see by looking at the chunks they ripped out themselves. Parts are missing, and it's like, what the hell? And then you have like, is this a dog ear or is this an elephant ear? I do have also in this collection, you can see it does look a lot like the elephant ear, just shifted down to be on where it would be on a lion. Just further, and then it has the elephant foot too. You can see here it has the elephant foot, so it's like it doesn't even have the blue dog ear people were making up. That's just one again a kind of misinformation. There's a lot of like subtle misinformation people are using with like these character designs because you can see it's just a mixture of the line that we can't see and this and these two. That said, it does have like even the bird hand isn't the same because this is clearly supposed to be this character's hand. You can see it's the same foot there, but it has like a realistic bird hand. There's so many weird things with this damn design. And we don't even have the original one's jersey to look at, like the original lion that's unaltered. I'm just so... Here's the thing. When clear correlation is not inarguably made between two characters in a FNAF series or general mystery, the subtle differences are what decides the difference between them. Unless they are clearly meant to look like something, it is really hard to say this character is or isn't the same if there are inconsistencies with how they're presented. And this is an example of that. When we have one character who in the same game, in the same section, has different design elements between itself, how are we supposed to say, oh, they're trying to say something here or not with design differences? Like, they clearly went out of their way to make Burntrap look like Spring Bonnie in some spots. It has the rib cage, it has these arm links, it has the antenna, rabbit ear things. You even see, if we zoom back in all the way to the originals, before I altered anything, you can see some of these coil spots back here that it has. Like, they're even like some very similar bolt textures. You know? And it's like, what the hell, Sealwool? Are these characters related or not? And it doesn't even help that one character's questionably canon now, but like still sort of canon. Like it's canon in the same way that Nightmare Beyond is canon. It's like an idea that someone pitched in the universe, like it to be in a VR game. You know, like it's canon as a non-canon character. If that makes sense. It's just like, what the hell? Where's the corpse go? If these are the same character, why do they look so different? And why is the blob still inarguably real? Or the Tangle, as it's now called. Potentially. It's just so... I'm just so lost at what they're trying to convey with these guys. And like I said, it's really hard to disprove these aren't the same character when they're... Like, there's so little in common between these two that should Steelwool have been consistent in the mascot's costume design, like, if they had just made this look the same, we could inarguably say, oh, Burntrap and Springtrap and Mimic are separate characters. But then, you have shit like this, and it's like, how are we supposed to handle that? Or, potentially, if we look at the mascot, we can see its legs are way shorter proportionally than the Mimic's really lengthy legs. Like, look how long they are. compared to its body. Actually, I mean, not really, but if we're assuming it's collapsing this entire beam, then it lines up better. Let me take a look at it from inner lighting. I mean, it's still different, definitively. But it's closer for assuming that entire leg spot is collapsed. It doesn't even help. Since I don't have this source model, I can't rip off the costume to compare the endo parts. Like I do with Burntrap, which is annoying. Can we see inside the feet what you've got there? I didn't think to look at that before, but no. Feet are hollow. Whatever. I think the video has gone across its point. I hope I debunked some myths about differences between these costumes that aren't there. I do want to deposit my kind of more crack-headed concept I thought of, which would explain the model discrepancies a bit. So, Burntrap is like a fantasy, a made-up character that never existed, which is why it's different. So technically a different character than the Mick, but it is a narrative parallel within whatever fictional sense that it's in, you know? I know parallels are kind of a scary word, especially associated with the books. But I don't mean that. I mean, like, someone drew the Burntrap to represent what the Mimic represents. Whether it be Gregory or the Mimic thinking about itself or thinking about William, etc. And this costume Mimic, in this hype, I don't believe this theory, by the way. This is a thing I'm pitching out just to see if anyone wants to think about it or talk about it. And this costume Mimic is the book Mimic. But this Mimic is a separate game-only Mimic. So this is the book Mimic after all the epilogues, after all that. And then Cassie is killing that one. So in that, and this is, the reason I bring this up is, the Endoskeleton is the only change in that ending. While the scooping room is still modeled, or the scooper ending, it's called that internally in the files, by the way, that's not people assuming, it's the scooper. The scooper model in that room are there regardless, but only if you open those doors does the Mimic have this costume, and if it has this costume, you can't get the neutral ending with the elevator. You can't go into the elevator to hear Gregory's whole, like, oh, I've got to drop you down the elevator shaft, Cassie. Only the blank Mimic with nothing on it can do that. These two exist in basically different continuity senses within the ruin endings. Like, one ending, Cassie can't make it to the elevator and has to go into the scooping room. And in one ending, Cassie can't get into the scooping room at all because the doors are closed. And therefore, she has to go through this elevator and then be promptly dropped down by Gregory. Gregory with a question mark, kind of. So if this is the guy from the books and this is a new game-only Mimic, that could explain that if we're meant to take it that seriously or look into it in that deep of a light. That would explain why, unlike almost every other alternate ending choice, there are physical different elements. Because if you think about it, if we rewind to FNAF 3, the souls still exist regardless of whether Happy Estate are freed or not. Those ghosts still existed at some point. You're not changing whether the fact that they exist or not, you're changing whether they were freed or not. If you go forward to FNAF's sister location, the next time we had different endings that we could really dissect, the scooping room and the secret room still exist. Mike canonically goes to the scooping room, but that secret room still exists. Everything in it is still there, and Mike always has the option to go there as long as he's done whatever. And it doesn't prevent you from going to the scooping room. There aren't two separate timelines there. Per se. They're just two different options Mike could have made that night. But he made one real option. And it was very clearly denoted which one was the real option. FNAF 6 had the same thing. It's clear that all those physical options still existed. You know? Like, there isn't a theoretical, like, oh, Burntrap doesn't exist, or Scraptrap doesn't exist in this continuity, therefore this ending can't happen this way. You know? They're all reflections of the choices someone could make, but in Cassie's case, in the timeline where she unlocks those doors to go to the scooping ending, which is not told to her by anyone, and there's no reason she would know to do that, she can no longer go in the elevator, which is such a strange fucking decision. It almost feels like it's implying two different things. And part of the reason I think it could be the book mimic versus the game mimic is that could explain the costume difference, why one's in costume inherently and one isn't in costume inherently. Like, this mimic is always going to be in the costume and he's always going to be the one that's in the scooper, regardless. This mimic is always going to be the one who's going to be lose an arm in the elevator, you know? And what would explain little design differences like this would be if this is the book mimic and this is the wrap up to the epilogue story. The scooper killing it or destroying it is how the book mimic is defeated once and for all, and Cassie is there regardless in both stories. So Ruin serves as the ending for the epilogue's continuity and storyline, as well as in the security breach main timeline or whatever sets up help want to. That is ridiculously convoluted and confusing, and there are so many little design differences and inconsistencies here already that it really shouldn't matter or make that much sense anyway. But, you know, that would explain that. Fuck, I just realized the legs are different. I mean, oh yeah, that's completely different. The foot's the same, but the actual connected fabric's the same as the jersey of the lion, which is strange. The track jackets. Yeah, monogram track jackets with the collar. So that's part of the line, actually. I don't know. People are saying that this kind of looks like a shallow attempt to mimic Gregory. Gregory has to have brown hair, an eye, like human eyes, etc. He has to have the little thing on his wrist where the Faz watch would be. And then he has a blue shirt, so it has to have the blue shirt from the Lion jersey. People made that connection, which I think is interesting. Like, given the materials it has, this is the best it can muster. And what's even weirder is Burntrap's room with the charger in it is still in ruin. So that space did exist, and there was an actual animatronic sometime there that Vanny or Gregory or GGY Gregory or someone put there for whatever reason. Like, that entire thing was still there. I just am so, like, once again, if they were just a little bit more consistent or it was a little bit more clear what we were meant to get out of it, I could make theories a bit easier. But they've given this character too much flexibility. I want to make a video on this. This is a video I'm actually thinking about writing. Is a problem I have with the Mimic, more so than any of the complaints like, it overrides William, it's too sci-fi, yada yada. A lot of complaints I don't really care about. But the complaint I have is they've given this character like 10 different abilities to it. It can shapeshift, it can copy voices, it can copy behaviors and personalities. It can hack technology. It can interact with technology in weird, funky ways. It can, like, send messages to people who aren't related to it at all. And if it's connected to the Vanny network and Nexus is no longer locking it away and trapping it down there, it has access to, like, Vanny network properties. If the Vanny network is real in any extent, if what we're looking at in-game is actual, like, flip side, phasing through walls powers, like some people think it might be, this character has that now, because there's no AI, or there's no Nexus to keep it from doing that anymore. And it's just like, it can shapeshift. It can fit in any costume. It can rip people into pieces easily. It can insert people wearing costumes. It can do so many things that it has literal like limitless theorizing potential, and not in a good way. I think good theorizing elements are things where there's limits to how you can observe things. Like, William can only die once, and that's in Springtrap before he's burned. You can't argue William died earlier in the timeline and then came back to be Springtrap again. Unless you want to get really wild and out there with your theories, which makes them less believable, which means less people support them, etc. That's the kind of inherent balance of theories, is the more levels of steps you have to go to work around what's established, the less likely your theory is and sounds. But when you create a character with so many outlandish abilities and like traits to it all, who's to say it is or isn't those things people are saying? It's just so frustrating that they made a character who can do almost anything. And it's also frustrating that it's like they kind of confirm Tails games, but then it's like with this reasonable level of deniability, you know? Because it's like, other than the lion, these aren't really Tails costumes, unless they just haven't appeared yet, and that's going to appear in B7. Or the Hypothetical 9 book that hasn't really been confirmed. I mean, it was originally confirmed, but we don't. It's really sketchy whether it exists or not. But these two, I don't remember at all from Tales, and I remember I was rereading some summaries before Ruin. The lion's there. Actually, I haven't read Tiger Rock at all. I think that's where the lion's really prominent. I want to read Tiger Rock. I just haven't got a chance to. But like, I'm not even sure. Like, there's this chance that Scott said, "Oh, it wears a lion costume in this important scene." Scholastic writers, and they're like, "Oh, okay, we'll adapt the lion costume." It's like, that's the frustrating thing. Since it's not like 1-to-1. People are saying, "Oh, this is the blue dog ear," but it's clearly the damn elephant ear, or at least it could be the elephant ear, which is another frustrating element of it. Like I said, there's plausible deniability in both regards. If it was only the blue dog and there was the mushroom in its costume, more obviously, that would help get the deniability across, or that could help break the deniability. But it isn't. There's not enough of a room to break the connection or establish it. So at the end of the day, we really didn't make much progress in terms of the mimic theorizing point, which is what was becoming more and more contentious. And I don't blame anyone for picking either side at this point, because there's so much you can work with either angle now. I feel like Tales Games is probably going to prevail more unless it's directly debunked in 102 or an official statement, or theoretically, if the Mimic epilogues kill off the Mimic, then you have to theorize how it would come back, you know. But if it's like crushed into a billion pieces, then it's not coming back at all. I don't. So it's just like they'd have to be very clean in establishing how they handle it. Moving forward, I really hope we get an official statement from Scott or Steelwool saying either Tales Games is canon or not. I really don't know why there hasn't been an official statement from either. I don't think either of them are ignorant of this debate or topic and this confusion. So I don't know why this hasn't been addressed, because it's like, it's not a spoiler. Saying, "Oh, read the books because they're part of the game continuity," is not a spoiler in any way. You know, it's just, why haven't they said something? I'm so frustrated with that, because clearly this was not a definitive answer. Anyway, I'm just gonna end this here. Bye.